Hello and welcome to a December 1st post-game edition of the Nittany Dispatch. I am John Sauber, Penn State beat writer at the Center Daily Times. She's Audrey Snyder doing the same at The Athletic. And we have booked travel to Indianapolis. I really, genuinely, I'm laughing because
Here we are.
am in disbelief.
Yeah, I spaced it out. I left my house Saturday at halftime of the game. And John, we talked about it pregame. We said, hey, this is the path. If Michigan wins, slim chance, but everything's fallen Penn State's way. Ryan Day's record in the game, all this, blah, blah, blah. The way that the game was unfolding Saturday morning afternoon as I'm leaving my house, I left the door open for, I might need to start looking at flights. And I thought for sure once I pulled the flights up, as soon as I got to the Beaver Stadium press box, second half hadn't even started yet, that was going to jinx it. Did not jinx it, John. Did not jinx it. Penn State Big Ten title game bound next Saturday night in Indianapolis, 8 o'clock p.m., playing number 1 Oregon. And boy, we have a lot to talk about now, don't we?
You can't discount how much Ryan Day likes losing to Michigan.
Holy
I think
cow.
that's what we didn't account for. Like, just got to be his favorite thing in the world is losing to Michigan. Unbelievable
in
stuff.
Columbus,
yes, that's the thing. This was a home game. I know I said that either Penn State was losing to Minnesota. I said this in the press box prior to the Minnesota game, that either Penn State was losing to Minnesota or they were going to the Big Ten title game because Ohio State was losing to Michigan. And I got to tell you, I said it. I don't think I believed it based on how I felt when it actually happened, because I was in legitimate disbelief in the press box. We have the TVs above us, and you're like, if people who follow me on any social media, I usually post those views from today's office photos when like a game day or whatever.
Well, that's very classic sports writer of you.
Yeah.
Basic of you.
Listen, I learned from the best in my mentor, Malcolm Moran. So that's something he always did. It's something that I've taken as well.
That's like every sports writer does that typically.
Yeah,
I do
for sure.
sometimes.
And so I usually post that like as soon as I get to the press box, probably 2.5 hours before kickoff. I think I posted it like 10 minutes before the Penn State game started because I was so focused on Ohio State, Michigan. And again, in complete disbelief that it's actually unfolding the way it is. And I promise we'll get to Penn State, Maryland, and the Penn State going to the Big Ten title game. But like the way it unfolded was so unbelievable because Warren throws a pick to Jack Sawyer on the goal line where he has a wide open receiver in the end zone. And it looks like, okay, Ohio State's going to go down and win the game here.
Will Howard.
No, I'm talking about the Michigan pick.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Oh, trust me.
I was like, Joe, where are you going? Yeah. Okay.
No, there are a lot of goal line picks to discuss.
Yeah.
But Warren throws the pick to Jack Sawyer, and Sawyer, runs it back a little bit. And then Ohio State has to punt. And then you could just feel it. Like you just feel that Michigan was going to score. It's will Ohio State score with the limited time they have left? And the answer was a resounding no. And I got to say, people who listen to this podcast and people who read my writing, it feels like they were warned about Will Howard and that in these big moments, he has propensity for blowing it. And in Ohio State's 2 losses to Oregon and Michigan, what did he do, Audrey? He blew it. And
take it easy on the hometown guy here, John.
Fair. But listen, I'm just saying, and I'm sure this has got to be a very, very sweet day for Kyle McCord helping Syracuse go 9-3.
When you bankroll a roster like that, and this is how it works. Like it is.
Penn State fans have got to be reveling in this right now. Like the Schadenfreude from Ohio State losing that game has to be at an all-time high.
So here's the thing, and we didn't, because there was no need for us to talk to him today, but I was very curious if we would have gotten Julian Fleming, what today was like for him in terms of the scoreboard watching and all of that, because and we mentioned on the pregame where I said I hope that Penn State fans would get that really cool scoreboard watching thing because you and I love that with sports and our teams in particular. And it was so cold here that in my brisk walk from the parking lot to the press box, I didn't see anybody like sitting around watching TVs because it was that cold today, which I do not blame them one bit because I was cold just walking from the car into the stadium. But once I got in there, like you, glued to the game, Penn State's Senior Day ceremony is happening. And I'm going to be honest, John, I saw none of it.
No,
Like,
neither did
I stopped and took a photo of the video board of, like, the senior class and tweeted it, and that was it, because at that point, it's crunch time for the game, and I am frantically searching for flights, watching flight prices skyrocket, and, like, obviously, like, this is just part of the job. You're trying to get these logistics hammered out and figure out, okay, where do I need to be? When do I need to be there? And then it's like, oh yeah, by the way, Penn State still needs to beat Maryland. So like, maybe I shouldn't book this flight just yet. Um, and then Nick Singleton comes out with the fumble, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is gonna be
Yeah.
like this would just be the most painful thing for Penn State fans. But really the game was not in question. Maryland jumps out 7-0, but then it really just Penn State steamrolls them. But going back to what I was trying to go to earlier, the point I attempted to make and didn't, as always, the scoreboard scene, like they weren't playing the game in the video boards in Beaver Stadium. There never was a score update from like the PA announcer that I heard.
They did have the other games around the country on the scoreboard at one point.
Okay.
And I don't know if it popped back up after Michigan took the lead. I don't know if I might be wrong. I wasn't really paying attention to it as much once that was over.
Yeah, I didn't even see that. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't think they put it up too much.
Yeah, it very much felt like there was an effort to say, "Hey, we're focusing on this game here." Now, everyone with their phone, obviously, they're. I'm sure people were glued to it. But even when Michigan won at the end, I thought maybe you'd get some kind of cheer from the crowd of some sort of, "Hey, win and you're in." And there wasn't that, which I thought was a little bit odd. But then it was also like literally senior days happening. So like there was a bit of a cheer, but I was like, I think that was for the senior class. It was kind of bizarre to try and decipher the difference there if there was one. But talking to players post game, it was really interesting of like even James Franklin, like, when did you know? How did you find out? And James Franklin made it a point to obviously not tell players that win and you're in. It was, hey, we got to beat Maryland, whatever. But then some guys said they had no idea. I believe Tyler Warren said he had no clue until they flashed it on the video board afterwards.
So Tyler Warren, the first question I asked him, I was like, when did you know? And what were you feeling when you found out? How did you react and all that? And he said something along the lines of, oh, when they put it up on the Jumbotron. And at first I was like, oh, did they flash the score up? He's like, after the game. I was like, you're kidding. I was like, that's not true. And I was like, so you didn't know? He's like, no, I found out afterward. And listen, sometimes I find things like that hard to believe with guys like that.
Yeah.
Like, you didn't know? Then you piece together the timing of this. He's going through senior day. Like, he doesn't have, a chance to look at that. That dude is never on his phone anyways, right? Like, we've heard this a million times. Like, he's not someone to check into those things.
Other guys did find out, though.
Yes, I wouldn't be surprised if, like, that makes sense to me that he wouldn't know until then. Real quick, before I forget this, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, don't forget those 5-star ratings really help us out, as do the reviews. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button down below. Hit the subscribe button as well as we continue marching toward 2,000 subscribers. Who knows? Maybe we'll get there by the Big Ten title game.
And several cups of coffee.
Yes. But yeah, this is Jalen Reed said that he checked. He checked the score on his phone, saw that Michigan had kicked the field goal, and then just kind of locked back in. And I think that kind of reaction by him and Warren not knowing and other guys either not knowing or not caring enough to find out and it's cliched at this point, and it's maybe even overdone in some people's opinions. But I think it's a testament to the 1-0 stuff that James has preached for, a decade now, or however long it's been since he started doing that. Like, so many teams in college football have lost to teams they had no business being in games against. Like, and the closest Penn State got was a legitimately difficult matchup with Minnesota last week on the road in pretty cold conditions. Again, against a Minnesota team that's probably better than its 7-5 record. Like, I've like, you roll your eyes when you see the Maryland, or Iowa, whatever. Like, and you're like, whatever. I get what he's trying to do, but this doesn't mean anything. But it really is a testament to his ability to get guys to buy into all that matters is the task in front of you. And again, across college football, That ain't how it goes. Every team except for
Yeah.
Penn State, Oregon, and Texas has lost to somebody they shouldn't have lost to. And those teams, and maybe you want to throw Georgia in there if you'd like, but outside of that, like this is a unique team in that regard.
Yeah, you go 11-1 and like that's nothing to bat an eye at. Like that to me is kind of the other piece to this because I think there's a bit of maybe a little bit of a narrative of like, oh, Penn State kind of backs into this Big Ten title game because they needed a lot of help and the scenarios unfolded their way. If you want to believe that, I think you also have to believe the other side of that conversation, which is what you were saying, John, the fact that Penn State did not have one of those, I call them a clunker of a loss where, this just should not have happened. And sure, you needed overtime in USC, and sure, you needed 3 4th down conversions against Minnesota. But at the end of the day, as James Franklin said tonight, sometimes it's not going to be pretty, but a win's a win, right? And as much as your seasons have always come down to Ohio State and Michigan, for as many times as you were stuffed up in that loaded Big Ten East in previous years, and you had all the 10-2 seasons, and everybody was, yes, so what? Who did you beat? You lost these marquee games. Like, enjoy the fact that something finally broke your way, right? Like, don't be miserable that you're playing for a freaking Big Ten championship, right? Like, this is only the second time in program history that it's happened. There were so many times, so many rosters between 2016 and now where you say, okay, like this group maybe can do it, but there were all these teams in front of them. Like, for once, something broke your way. And you know what? You are in a better position now going in the next weekend than you would have been if you didn't make the Big Ten title game. And this, I think, is a big conversation that you and I are going to have today because I saw that even with like 2 minutes to go in Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State fans are saying, well, do we even want to make this game? Should we want to go to Indianapolis?
That's ludicrous to me.
And I've tried to wrap my head around like this argument for the last couple of weeks, right? As soon as we started looking at the 4th criteria of the Big Ten tiebreakers, that's when we knew that all hell was going to break loose because once we had the 4th criteria, that was when it was like, well, if this happens, we're going to know why. And sure enough, it was the 4th criteria, which is why Penn State's going to Indianapolis. There were 6 tiebreakers. There was a lot of room. We were only like one stop away from Sports Source Analytics.
Yeah, what information we don't have publicly available, that would have gone over real well.
Yeah, that would have been great.
I do like you talk about like not like trying to understand that discussion. Like I wrote about this. This will be published, I believe, Sunday morning in my Good About Ugly column. Like in the good column is qualifying for the Big Ten title game because I thought this is worth discussing. And one of the things I wrote is like, I understand the arguments, but they're wrong. Like,
well, I mean, the arguments wrong. Are okay.
Like the argument is it's more wear and tear, and you might get stuck playing essentially an extra game and still having to play in the first round. This goes back to my philosophy in general, and I think the philosophy with like going for it on 4th down and stuff like that. Why are we the royal we assuming the worst, right? Like why is it trying to play it safe? Mind you, by the way, Mario Cristobal crushing it today, kicking a field goal down 7 on 4th and goal. Just admit you don't want to win the game. That's all. It's very easy to do. Just say it. But it's stuff like that, right? Like where you assume the worst outcome and prepare for that rather than like, hey, maybe they just, I don't know, they beat Oregon and they're the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. And they get to face the number 8 or 9 seed, safely a team that's probably worse than them in the quarterfinals, which they get a free pass to at the bowl location. Well, unfortunately for Penn State, it would be the Rose Bowl. And that's actually a nightmare travel-wise for us. But like usually
unfortunately, the Rose Bowl, John. Wow. Yeah, let me cry one out for that.
I won't mind another trip to Los Angeles. But like the semifinals, you get the more favorable location closest to your home stadium. Like there's so many advantages to being the number 1 seed and having the opportunity to be a number 1 seed. You know how you don't have that? If you don't have a chance to play for the conference title. Like I guess maybe it's a mentality difference from myself and people who disagree. Like I don't get assuming the worst in those situations, right? Like when going for it on 4th down, why is it like, well, think of all the things that could go wrong if you don't get it. Well, what if you get it? What if you just get it? And and I said this, it's very funny. Ohio State had a 4th and 1, I think on their own 21 in the 4th quarter on Saturday. And this won't surprise you. I said they should go for this. Go get the 1 yard. Like you're struggling. You're starting to show signs of cracking on defense against Michigan's rushing offense. Like you need to score. Like go for it. It's 4th and 1. You have Quinshon Judkins, Travion Henderson, Will Howard, like 3 excellent rushing threats. Go for it. And I was immediate pushback from the rest of the press box. That's insane. You can't even consider doing that. Well, Ohio State lost the game because they couldn't go down and drive and score. Like when you actually have time to be able to run the ball in those situations, why is the assumption here's how it screws everything up? Why is it not?
Well, I'm sure
these are the benefits to something,
right?
like
I'm sure it's backed by analytics somewhere, right? I'm sure there's a lot of these things. We overanalyze a lot of stuff, and I think though, I guess part of what I think maybe like how people arrive at this conclusion is okay. Let's run the worst case scenario. Penn State goes to Indianapolis, gets boat raced, like absolutely pantsed by the Ducks.
49-7, can't hang,
Yeah.
whatever.
Okay, then how far do they fall? Because at that point, they're still in the playoff, but are you still hosting a game?
6th. They fall to 6th.
So So 5 through 8 host. So 6, you're still hosting, right? Because in my
where they were going to be had Ohio State won today? They were going to be 6.
Yeah, because that's and that to me is again, I think there's some fear of, okay, if you get pushed down out of you're not hosting, and I get it. Like there's so much excitement about the idea of a playoff game in Beaver Stadium, and people are looking forward to that, and the community is looking forward to that. I totally get that. Because again, selfishly, we want to see that too, because we don't want to have to travel that first round, right? Like,
although I will say, and this is just an inside baseball thing, if this is the day that the Beaver Stadium press box goes out, I think it was a good one. A shout out to Penn State's SIDs, Chris Peterson, Greg Kincaid, and Paul Marbo, who I thought handled
a nice send off. Yeah,
nice send off for the press box today that will be torn down this offseason.
Yeah, and that's everybody's trying to, and you could even see it with the seniors, like as they're leaving, it's like Tyler Warren was taking a lot of photos on the field and in the tunnel, and it's like, are we going to be back here, right? Because this was not the ending that anybody saw coming today. And so you're trying to contextualize all of that. But I think the bottom line is you are in a better position now than you were Saturday morning when you woke up. And yeah, you destroyed Maryland in a game that, I will be honest, I will remember nothing from this game.
I'll remember a touchdown, specifically the last one.
Oh, well, yeah, you're right. You're right. I will remember
we'll get to
salty
that.
handshake in that. Yeah, that'll be about it. But like you're just trying to figure out, okay, how do people arrive at this worst case scenario? Now, okay, somebody gets hurt, right? That's another worst case scenario that you can run. That could have happened today. That could have happened last week. That could happen in the first round. That's the sport, right? Injuries are a part of the game. What Penn State has shown a lot this year is that they're really resilient. You're playing without one of the best safeties in college football and have been for quite some time. And we're not talking about it because, well, we haven't needed to. You're playing without your starting right tackle and will be for quite some time. And again, this is something else that we're not really having to dive into too deeply. And I also think it speaks to the resiliency of this team that minutes after they lost to Ohio State, players were talking about, okay, we want another shot at them. Like, we're not scared of them. We want to play them. And you know what? If that locker room believes that, if this is a season, which we've seen time and time again, crazy things have happened. If Wisconsin had Oregon on the ropes 2 weeks ago, why are we all just assuming the worst here? Like, it's difficult to figure. But I think like you've got a chance to put yourself in the best situation possible and secure a first round bye.
Let's take a brief break from the podcast to discuss our good friends at Rhoback. And once again, there it is on my shoulder, the Rhoback logo. Unfortunately, not wearing the Rhoback hat tonight, as I left that hat in the press box. Shout out to Max Ralph of Penn Live, who grabbed that for me so it didn't get torn down when it gets demolished. I didn't lose that hat forever, because that Rhoback hat is one of my favorite hats. And their hoodies, their performance hoodies, their performance joggers are some of my favorite hoodies and joggers. And if you'd like some Rhoback gear, you can get it as well over at rhoback.com with code TND20. You get 20% off your first order. That's TND20 is in the Nittany Dispatch 20. It's the holiday season. It's a great time to buy gifts for people, those in your life who if you like to golf, their performance shorts or performance polos are excellent golf clothes. And listen, today I walked into Beaver Stadium in a freezing cold day in a performance hoodie and performance joggers, and I felt great the entire time.
And I'm still thinking about John's hat getting left in the press box. It would have been perfect if, when the Beaver Stadium press box gets torn down after this season, the only thing left at John's seat is a piece of Roback apparel.
It's not even my seat. It's like where I go sit post game to write. You know how I go to the back corner?
But we would know it was yours, John.
Peaceful. Yeah, but you'd see the whole press box coming down, then something would be like floating like a feather down behind it. It'd just be a Roback hat coming down. Fortunately, perfect. I do not have to replace that Roback hat. It is one of my favorite hats. I stand by that. I wear it all the time. I wear it on this podcast all the time, just not today because I don't currently have it. But if you would like to get a Roback hat, if you like to get Roback performance hoodies, performance joggers, performance polos, and many other things, by the way, I mentioned those things specifically because I wear them a lot. Duffel bags. They have women's clothes. They have everything you could want. It's fantastic. You can get that all 20% off your first order of Roback at roback.com with code TND20. Now back to the show. One thing I wanted to mention too, just to get out in front of this, and hopefully this doesn't mush anything or jinx anything. This does feel a little bit like a team of destiny. I've started to feel that way in recent weeks. Like things really just keep breaking in their favor, despite, and even when things go poorly, even when things go against them, it doesn't go poorly. You know what I mean? They're kind of getting the right breaks because, I'll say it, to win a national title, you have to be lucky, right? Like among the best,
you need some luck in any championship.
You need to be one of the best teams.
You got to be healthy. You got to get hot at the right time, and you got to have a little bit of luck.
But it's important to note, you also have to be one of the best teams. Like you have to be one of the best teams, and you have to get lucky. And they're one of the best teams, and they're kind of getting lucky with some of these turns and how things are going for them. But I wanted to note too, like this idea that if your assumption is, well, Penn State's just going out there to lose to Oregon anyways. Why are you even watching the playoff? Because they're going to have to beat a team like that to get to the national. Like, are you just done watching the team the rest of the year? Like, you're going to have to beat teams like that.
Yes, in order to win any kind of championship, you have to beat good teams along the way. Like, that's
either you believe they're good enough to do it, like to beat a team like Oregon, to beat a team like, I don't know, like Miami, whoever you want to pick in the top group, or you don't. Texas. And Texas. If you don't think that Penn State can beat Oregon, then you probably don't think they can beat Ohio State or Georgia or Texas, in which case you don't think they can win the national title, in which case why bother?
We're about to find out,
right? But this is another great data point to figure out how far this program has come, how far this team has come. We'll get to the game.
That's what I'm excited about, John. I'm excited about the data point, the fact that Penn State has a chance to change the narrative, right? Everything, and I have a story that'll be up Sunday morning on The Athletic about this. It's like, we're about to find out just how good this team is. And you know what? How far they might go in the next 6 weeks. Because really, we don't know. Like, this sport, everybody, we've seen it. So many teams have had a bad day. Penn State hasn't. I mean, their bad day was still a good day compared to a lot of others with that loss to Ohio State. But yeah, you're just trying to piece this together. And I'm excited to go back to Indianapolis. I'm excited to potentially have different storylines to work with after writing about 10-2 a million times, right? Like, that's not the most exciting.
They won 11 games this regular season. Like, that is also notable.
Yes. And we've seen so much of the, well, who have they beaten argument. And again, I don't want to beat this to death, but also it's like, well, who have they lost to? That was a terrible loss, right? Like, you don't have that this year, and that matters more, I think, this year, considering how other teams have struggled.
This is hopefully a discussion that we don't have to have, and I really hope it's not. But they don't have to try and defend a loss to Northern Illinois. Yep. I don't know why. I think I said this in the preview pod. It just still bothers me. I don't know why in a loss to a really bad Northern Illinois team is tossed to the side as a fluke, but a 7-point loss where you had a chance to tie the game late is just an indictment of what your team is and where your program stands. Like, why do we do that? Like, why is that? It's weird. It happened. You cannot pretend it did not happen. It drives me nuts. We don't have to have this discussion now.
But I think there is a narrative that Penn State isn't a good team, or how good are they, or they're going to get in, they're going to lose in the first round, right? Like, I've seen
it's all the bias from. Sorry to cut you off, but it drives me nuts. It's all of the bias that people don't want to acknowledge that is there. Penn State is a fraudulent 11-1 team because Penn State has not been good as people think they are in the last few years. So that must mean that that's the case with this year's team. Notre Dame is actually better than you think they are because they have those gold helmets that always end up making it further in the postseason than you anticipate, or they
to play
work
like a
their
champion
way.
sign. Is that what gets it, John?
No, it's the brand, right? And I don't like to point to those things, but that's what it is. Like we all have, it's the same thing with Georgia, by the way, who almost lost to Georgia Tech, who is in the ACC, which is not the SEC. Like we do this with these, again, if you want to make it based on talent, do the rankings based on the composite recruiting rankings over the 5 years, or the blue chip ratio, I think it's called. Bud Elliott does it, but at 24/7 Sports. If you want to do that, then just do it and set it that way. I know I'm going on the same rant I seem to go on every week, but it drives me nuts every week, and it keeps happening. We keep having these discussions. Let's try to acknowledge our biases. We all have them. Right? Like you and I are a little too close to the sun with the Penn State program. I think it's fair to say it's happened.
No, John, we haven't seen the sun in like 2 weeks around here, but sure.
That's true. But like when you cover a team, you're not a fan of the team, but you are more in tune. You understand things more.
We
you
are
understand
way
thought
more
processes.
in the weeds with it. Yeah.
Yes. Like you just understand things more. I know that. And I know that the teams I watch more, I am biased for or against them more based on the fact that I've seen them more. I don't understand how we just ignore this idea that the SEC is magically better than everyone else when, again, your king, your Georgia Bulldogs beat Georgia Tech by 2 in 8 overtimes. And it's only because Georgia Tech refused to run the ball despite running it down their throats the entire game. I'm so tired of it. I got to tell you, Audrey, Tuesday, playoff ranking show is going to happen. I'm going to sit there and have my TV muted the entire time. I cannot handle.
I've been doing that for weeks.
John. I know you said you were. I said I usually do, and last week I got sucked into watching it because I was not in the place where I usually watch it at. I can't do it. I'm so tired of it, and I'm so sick of like. We can have a discussion about the media landscape if we'd like, but like this idea that you say something so it turns into its own 24-hour news cycle because of the thing you said. You know what I mean? Like an analyst says something and it creates discussions for 7 different TV shows that are going to get to talk about that one talking point and create its own news cycle. It drives me insane. I hate it. It's all very dumb. To go back to what I was saying, Oregon is awesome. They are 3rd in SP Plus in offense. They are 8th in SP Plus in defense. They are a very well-rounded team. Dan Lanning has done an excellent job with Oregon. Audrey, would you like to know which games they struggle with that has upset Oregon fans?
Sure.
Big games. And I got to tell you, James Franklin gets a lot of those insults levied his way on Saturday. And this will be a fascinating matchup from that standpoint. 2 teams who have 2 programs, 2 head coaches, whatever you want to say, who have struggled in those situations, or I think probably better to say perceived struggles because, when 2 top 5 teams play, it's going to, like, odds are it's going to be a little bit lucky for the winner, as I said earlier. But this is setting up to be a matchup, 1 that I think is going to tell us a lot about Penn State, but 2 that is just not the walkover that I think, for whatever reason, Penn State fans seem to think it's going to be. Like, I think Penn State fans are more pessimistic about Saturday than anyone else. Like, we'll get to our official predictions, and I'm not there yet.
We've got a whole week to get there. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll be watching a lot of all 22 film on Sunday and Monday because the weirdo that I am with these types of things, specifically with Oregon, because I haven't gotten to watch them a ton this year as much as I want.
But John, this is also the great part.
This is that's
this
to
is
say,
what we
like,
wanted in the Big Ten, in the new matchups, right? Like, this is a game that if you'd have told me back in August of, oh, hey, Penn State's going to play Oregon this year, sign me up. It's going to be awesome, right? Like,
yes,
to me, this is, and again, and I think this is a little bit of the fan fear for some is the committee is going to be watching you and they are going to be locked in and like, oh boy, what's going to happen? Like, play the game and find out, right?
Just go win it. I feel like that's the easiest option. But like, no, all of this is to say that this is going to be an excellent test for Penn State. If you put me on the spot, I think I'd probably pick Penn State to win as of now. We'll see how I feel about all of that after watching it all.
You also could be delirious. It's like after 1 a.m. Sunday, you might be a little.
Think about who you're talking to.
Yeah, this is pure. Never mind.
This is late for you. This is mid-afternoon for me. I'm in my prime hours. But I think, like, I think it's going to be a really close, really good game between two teams that are pretty evenly matched. And I think that says a lot about how far Penn State has come because Oregon is the only undefeated Power 5 team in college football, Power 4 team, excuse me, in college football. I still make that mistake all the time, by the way.
Yeah, it's weird.
Yeah. But speaking
But the
of
duck is an amazing mascot, and as you were saying that, I did have the idea of like, oh boy, we're gonna get to see the duck mascot next week. Like that's cool.
That is very exciting. We're also going to get to see a very good offense, one led by Dillon Gabriel, who's been good at Oregon, and I will leave that there when we inevitably have to have a Heisman discussion at some point.
I wanted to. You open the door, John, so I'm going to kick it down and march right through. You have two teams. One of them came into the season with someone that was the presumed Heisman Trophy frontrunner. The other one with a tight end that we're like, okay, yeah, he's supposed to be good, but who knows how good. At this point, if you could pick one of them with a more likely chance, well, I hate how I phrase that because the Heisman
more likely it's going to be Gabriel because I think
more
deserving.
I think more deserving. There is a really interesting argument to be had there, and that Penn State has the more valuable piece in that Heisman argument.
You want to take that people will grab, hopefully not aggregate, please.
Oh no, please don't aggregate us to death. No.
I would rather have Tyler Warren if I was discussing from a value-added standpoint. Not if you're starting a team, you always take the quarterback if you're starting a team. But if I were starting a team, I would rather have Drew Allar than Dillon Gabriel.
That's I mean, that's fair. Like, I think that's.
But then why is I don't want to do the.
Oh boy, you're gonna start yelling about Heisman ballots here, aren't we?
Well, we can't really discuss that yet.
We're not at the voters. To do this.
I do not understand the Dillon Gabriel Heisman stuff. Again, have not been able to watch Oregon as closely as I would like this year. As closely as I would like, I say, having watched like 6 of their games still. Just don't get it. Maybe I'll feel differently after I dive into the All-22, but just don't get it. Feel like I'm missing something. Speaking of missing something, we should probably get into Maryland missing the chance to score late in the game and therefore giving Penn State a touchdown. And I got to say, Mike Loxley makes a point. All sports should be like, hey, we should be allowed to keep scoring, but you shouldn't. Like, we should be allowed to continue to play this out.
Only the Packers can score points. You cannot.
You know what? I hope the Ravens agree to that Sunday. This is Sunday. It's in
today.
Like 15 hours. Yeah, today. I hope the Ravens agree to that today. That the Eagles get to keep scoring, but the Ravens do not get to keep scoring. Audrey, what is he talking about? What is this ludicrous idea that Maryland is throwing the ball with a minute left in a game that is over, right? If you're waving the white flag, then everybody waves the white flag and you can move on. Everyone runs the ball, game ends, it's fine. But this idea that you get to throw the ball late with your starters in, but Penn State puts its backups in and it must wave the white flag on your behalf, get out of here. I have so many other words I would like to say right now, but we've done a very good job of being a PG podcast for a very long time. It is just dumb. Like this idea that Penn State did something wrong by scoring a touchdown as time expired. I don't care. Stop them. Don't let them do it. And by the way, if you don't want them to throw the ball, you should probably stop throwing the ball too. Again, that interception was thrown with just over a minute left in the game. Maryland throws that pick. But Penn State is the villain in this situation. Like, give me a break. It is the dumbest discussion. Like, it is. People will pay a lot of attention to it because James has been caught out for this before with West Virginia last year, Beaver Stadium. I didn't care then. I don't care now. If you don't want them to score, don't let them
Stop
score.
it.
And if you don't want them to throw the ball, then you probably shouldn't be throwing the ball. What is that not insanity for this idea? This to be the idea that hey, whoa, only we can throw. You can't throw. Only we can throw. Like we're the ones that are losing. Like get out of here. You're trying to make the game close again.
So it's funny because I was home for Thanksgiving and I was hanging out with my nephew and he's 4 and he's really interested in the NFL right now, right? Like he's just kind of like obsessing over it. And he likes learning the team names and the helmet logos, right? And we had a good conversation about how the Georgia G looks like the Green Bay Packers G. And everything is like, well, why? Why does it this way, right? And then the question was, well, why did the Packers beat the Dolphins? Why? And you're explaining it. Well, how do they score points and why is it worth 6, right? And so like, you know, you get exhausted trying to just like lay these things out, all these questions. And it's like, it kind of felt like to me that's what this was. It's like, well, why can they score but we can? And like, but we're trying, and why? Like, it was so stupid. And I think we need to have a like it's dumb segment of the week, because I feel like every week for the last like 3 or 4 weeks we've had something that's been like really like annoying us.
Yes.
And that to me was like, so you get like this icy at best handshake between Loxley and Franklin post game, where Loxley goes in to say something.
Loxley looked pissed off.
Yeah, Mark Brennan has a great video of this from 247, and Loxley like looks really mad, says something to James. You can't quite tell what he's saying, but then James says something like something along the lines of, and I should remember this because I watched the video like 4 times, of like, if that's how you feel, that's how you feel, right? So Loxley is asked about it post game, and I guess, you know, delivered that his feelings were that, you know, Penn State's decision there to keep throwing the ball and to score late was bullshit, and that he disagreed with it. So then
then he threw in the caveat of, I've got a lot of respect for Penn State's program.
Yeah, Penn State, but it's bullshit. It's like, what are we doing? And then Franklin, of course, then gets asked about it. And he delivered, I thought, like the mic drop moment of the season. Like, if the microphone wasn't like fixed to the stand, James Franklin just picked it up and dropped it right there in the Beaver Stadium media room. And part of his, you know, explanation is, hey, you guys are trying to score. The 3s and 4s are in against your first team, which also good flex.
Yeah, that was the
defense.
Easily the funniest part. Like, you pulled your starters, we had our backups in, is a very funny thing for James to say.
Yeah, it's like, hey, like, stop them if you don't want us to score, right? And he's like, James Franklin's point is, hey, they are 3s and 4s. They're allowed to play football too, and they should be allowed to score as well.
Not just allowed to, and I think this is important phrasing. He said they earned the right to play, right? Like, they've earned the right to play football, and yes, they have.
You know what? And you've got players out there who've waited all year to see the field, or to have their first career touchdown, or to have their big moment, and this is their shot. And so you have that, but then he also gets into it, and Franklin's like, you know, and by the way, with the playoff now, like, everything matters, and people are going to look at the score differential, and you know, it's the eye test. And again, if people are just scoreboard watching, which the committee has, you know, shown kind of some tendencies to do that, perhaps.
Well, not just the committee, to be clear, analysts on ESPN when discussing the rankings.
Yes, and so then you say, okay, like 44-7 looks a little bit better than it was, you know, 2 seconds prior before the game ended. So yeah, that to me was just like one of those funny, bizarre sequences. But like, you're right when we say like there's not much we're going to remember from this game. We got the handshake gate with Maryland from several years ago. Now you get like this icy exchange, and that's like as much as we have. Oh, I wanted to add too. Deny Dennis Sutton tweeted after the game about the whole, which I'd forgotten about, the 2020 Maryland graphic of
what an insane graphic. I forgot about it too. What an insane graphic to
like,
send.
That's all we have. Rivalry weekend, and this is what is like what we have to sift on here. Some tweets and handshakes and scoring late, like real juice here.
Yeah, well, I do, like, I've seen people say like well, if they could stop them, they would. It's like, well, yeah, that's my point. Like, you don't have to feel bad. These are not 8-year-olds. Like, they don't need to be pitied when they can't get a stop on defense. Like, they're gonna be all right.
Yeah, like they weren't getting participation ribbons, as last I saw, as they headed off the field.
This is not a Division III school. Like, they're on scholarship. Some of them are making NIL money. I don't want to broadly paint all college athletes as making it, because that's not the case, to be clear. I think it's probably unfair to say that just because players make money that you could be hypercritical of them. But like, they're adults. They can handle it. They are not like, no defensive back that gave up that touchdown is gonna, you know, pout about giving up that touchdown more than Mike Loxley did in the postgame presser. Like, it's just ridiculous. Like, it's fine. They're handling it fine, I assume. It is. I don't think anyone's life is going to drastically change based on the fact that you lost 38-7 rather than 44-7, unless you had the under, in which case you did lose some money on that particular touchdown. Which I do feel sympathy for those people in that situation. But yeah, it's just like, I can't believe it's even a discussion, right? Like, it's frustrating to me that it's 2024 and we're having this discussion. Like, go let the backups play. And again, like, I wouldn't even agree with it then, but Loxley would at least have more of a gripe if they weren't throwing the ball with a minute left in the game. Like, you were trying to score.
Yeah.
Like, it's the most asinine part of this for me. Like, this idea, and I apologize, I've said it 50 times, but this idea that you're allowed to go score, but they're not, is just stupid. Like, it is, it is, that's it. It makes no sense. There's no logic to it. It is, I don't know what era of college football coach where this was a thing. I don't think it ever was, where the other team's allowed to keep trying to score, but we're going to call it a day because we're going to let them score a couple times so they can feel better.
I guess,
get out of here.
I guess what I'm about to say is not going to make this better. But I'm going to say it anyway. Like, this also isn't new or surprising for Maryland, right? Like, you've been on the receiving end of this several times, right? Like, you shouldn't. That's what maybe makes this even more bizarre. Of like, is this something new, or like
Loxley's probably used to it?
Like, yeah, that's that. Like, it's like, okay, like, this is okay. Yeah, we've been here before. We've seen this before. Move it all along now. It wasn't. This was the Dante Cephas breakout game last year, right? Yeah, that was Maryland last year. Yeah, like
Dante Cephas, who was targeted on a throw to end Kansas State's game against Iowa State today by Taquan Roberson. In case anyone just wants to hear a pretty wild sentence about Kansas State football in 2024.
Blast from several pasts right there.
Got home, watched like 3 plays of that game, and like that was the last one. I was like, nah, like that's wild. I think we have probably covered everything as we need to. But credit to Mike Loxley for his complaints. He still did not do the dumbest thing a head coach did on Saturday, and that Mario Cristobal deserves a lot of credit for that. And I will harp on this until the end of time. I just want to make note too, by the way, they kicked that field goal just to wrap up my complaints for the day. They kicked that field goal with 3 minutes and 42 seconds left. Miami did, to cut it to a 4-point game. Do you know how many yards they had after that?
How many? None.
0, because they didn't touch the ball again. And that is karmic justice.
And that, John,
beautiful, and it is what they deserved.
When we talk about worst case scenarios and not giving yourself opportunities, this is what you get, right?
Miami might not make the playoff.
Take some chances, take some risks, like, which again, also wild when you think
not even necessarily a risk, by the way, sometimes it's just doing the math. And the best way that I've seen this put is people refer to this as gambling a lot, and that's kind of incorrect. And there's a professor at Penn, Dennis Selman, who's on the PHLY Sports Eagles podcast all the time. He talks about this. He does a lot of game theory stuff and everything. It's only gambling if at some point you get to leave with your percentage odds, right? Like, if I've got my 45% odds, I'm going to keep those. If in football, you're trying to get to 100% winnings, right? If we're going to keep up with the gambling.
Everyone would like a turn.
Well, yeah, right. Everyone, like, the team that wins ends up with 100% win probability. The team that loses ends up with a 0% win probability, right? So your goal is to maximize your chances of getting to that 100% by taking big chunks out of it one way or another, right? Like to keep adding to that win probability. Your goal is to keep going in that direction. And that's what a lot of these decisions are. It's not necessarily gambling. I think we think of it as gambling because we're used to, you punt on 4th down, you don't go for it in your own territory, whatever.
We're conditioned.
It feels that way. But if you just look at the simple math of it, it's not. It's just taking the appropriate opportunity to add more win probability, right? Like, I think that's a better way to look at it. It's how I try to look at it ever since I listened to the things he says. And like, I think that's in statistics, that stuff's obviously important. And I think in stuff like this, it's more important than it gets credit for.
But next time I go into a casino, I'm just going to walk in and say, well, it's not gambling. I'm just here to improve my chance.
No, here's the thing. When you can, if the casino is going to lock you in, until you leave with either 100% of what you had or 0%, then that's the case. Like, that's why it's not going to the casino. It's not the same thing. It's very different. You're not gambling. You're trying to just add win probability.
The thing that I think is just really crazy when you look back at, last Saturday, Minnesota halftime, 3rd quarter, like, again, we alluded to this earlier, like, we're talking about, Penn State might not even make the playoff, to here's where we are one Saturday later after they convert 3 4th downs to kill the clock. They wax Maryland, and then they get the help they need from Michigan. Now they're playing for a Big Ten championship. Like, what a crazy week when you think back. And you mentioned a little bit earlier about the team of destiny thing. Again, I go back to the 2016 team when they got hot, they went on a run, and once they had that comeback against Minnesota, it's like, oof, I really don't know who or what can stop this team right now. After, again, things looked really bleak at the beginning of that year, not like they did this year. But yeah, I think if you're Penn State, you are getting hot at the right time. You're healthy. I think Nick Singleton looked, his healthiest today. I talked with him after the game, and he said that he feels good. And so I think like you've got your chance, right? And that's all you can ask for at this point of the year. You have an opportunity to do something that, when you start camp in the beginning of the year and you outline all these goals and all these talking points, right? It's always, we want to win a Big Ten championship. We want to win a national championship. And you got the chance to do both. And that's not something that we were so sure would still be the case after November 2nd when they lost to Ohio State. But here we are on December 1st, and that chance is still there.
I was pretty sure they would not have a chance to win a Big Ten title after November 2nd.
Yeah.
But here we are. I was wrong, as many of us were. I do want to get you on the record about some of these things because we won't record again before the ranking show.
Is this you're like putting me on the spot here, John? Is that what
this
is?
Yes. These teams are done playing, so we kind of know what the resume is. Do you think Miami gets in the playoff?
I think so.
Does Ohio State host a playoff game?
Yes.
Host?
Yes.
That's interesting. I think they fall to 9. Is Indiana in safely now?
Yes. Because I gotta go to the state next week, so I have to be able to be let in order to go to Cafe Patachu. I don't want to mad at me.
True. Does Alabama or Ole Miss get into the playoff? And if
Alabama, yes. Ole Miss, no.
I think they both get in.
Yeah, could happen.
I am very curious to see. Clemson's eliminated as long as there's no bid stealers, I should say. I think Bama and Ole Miss get in. And the only bid stealers really are, I don't know, Clemson, right? They're probably the only one if they beat SMU because SMU's in even if they win or lose, I think SMU's in. Both SEC teams, Texas and Georgia, are in, win or lose. Both Big Ten teams are in, win or lose. Who am I forgetting? The Big 12, they're only getting one. Boise State, if they lose to UNLV, they just won't get in. And yeah, I think the only bid thief is Clemson at this point, and they're not getting in unless they win that game. But yeah, I think today kind of clinched it that Bama or Ole Miss or Bama and Ole Miss are both going to end up getting in. Been a weird day.
Very weird day. And
I think Miami falls out.
That's going to be
after looking at this, I think Miami falls out.
Yeah, that's going to be so again, do you know what time Tuesday night the rankings is? It back to 7 or
it's back at 7. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. And we're still like trying to, again, full disclosure, we're trying to figure out what our week looks like here.
A disaster is what it looks like.
Penn State has, like everyone else, it's the early signing period Wednesday.
This doesn't impact you, but Penn State men's basketball plays Purdue at home on Thursday. Like that's a pretty big game.
I was reminded of that detail post game, and I was talking to somebody. We were discussing the week, and they said, "Oh yeah, and by the way, Purdue comes to town Thursday night." I was like, "No, that's Packers Lions." Like
yeah, right. Of course,
it entered my head for a quick second, and then it left. But yeah,
but that's a pretty big game, But I think Miami falls below both Bama and Ole Miss. Do you know Miami's best win?
What would you classify that as?
At Louisville, 52-45, unranked Louisville. Unless you want to give them Florida 41-17 start the year, maybe Duke 53-31. So they've got like a couple mediocre wins. They have 2 bad losses. Well, not bad. They have 2 games they should win. Georgia Tech and Syracuse are not games that they should lose. And
hey, Georgia Tech just has the upset potential, John.
Yeah, and Georgia Tech has 5 losses. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And Syracuse is a little different because they're 9-3 at least, and that's been Fran Brown done an incredible job with that program. But like Georgia Tech has 5 losses, including losing to Virginia Tech, obviously losing to Georgia, losing to Notre Dame, losing to Louisville, losing to Syracuse. Like pretty middle of the pack team that has played up to some tough competition at times. I just like they are Miami is the ideal or the imperfect storm, I guess, for them of no great wins, no like a couple of like it's not like their losses are to I don't know Ohio State and Penn State or whatever, right? Like they have 2 losses that really really good teams should beat. They very nearly, and I would argue should have lost to Virginia Tech and Cal. So they had some officiating calls go their way in that were significant factor, a non-targeting call in the Cal game, and then the Hail Mary that was somehow overturned despite not having a discernible camera angle against Virginia Tech. Like this Miami team has received the benefit of the doubt quite a bit this year and still ended up losing 2 games to teams that they should beat pretty handily. I don't know. I think they end up dropping. I think the committee sees that as an opportunity to get Bama and Ole Miss into this, or at least one of the two, and Miami ends up falling out. Because if you recall, a lot of what Ward Manuel said when talking about Miami was like, Cam Ward's awesome. It's like, well, what about the rest? Like 21 other guys out there. And a head coach who's actively trying to not lose by as much. So again, shout out to Mario Cristobal. I'm going to leave the podcast there because that feels like the appropriate way to leave it.
That's a perfect ending for this very bizarre, crazy day.
We will be back either late Tuesday night, early afternoon Wednesday, sometime to figure all this out. We have, like Audrey said, we have no idea what our schedule is going to be this week. So bear with us a little bit.
Other than we have flights booked Friday morning to Indianapolis. That's about all we knew.
Returning on Monday. But yeah, it is going to be a hectic, chaotic week, a fun week, an exciting week for you, our listeners, presumably many of whom are Penn State fans. This is an unbelievable thing that happened, right? Like a thing that we didn't think was possible for the last month that I can confidently say a lot of people didn't think was possible. But it's here. And Penn State will be playing Oregon Saturday at 8 p.m. in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium for the Big Ten title and potentially for the number 1 overall seed in the college football playoff. And the cruelest twist of fate of all is the playoff expands to 12, and Penn State probably would have made it if it was 4. Just
I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, some real tough stuff. Some real
brutal
brutal timing for Penn State. But we will be here to cover it all moving forward. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, those 5-star ratings and those reviews really help us out. If you're watching on YouTube, hit the thumbs up button down below. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, as we continue the march to 2,000 followers and subscribers. If you'd like to follow Audrey on social media, you can find her on Twitter at AudSnyder4 and on Blue Sky at Audrey Snyder. You can find all of her writing over at The Athletic. You can find me on social media at John Sauber on Twitter. And if you search John Sauber on Blue Sky, you can find me there as well. You can find all of my writing on CenterDaily.com. We both have some stuff up already post-game. We will both have more. We will probably both have a lot of bylines this week. Just a lot of writing to be done, a lot of things happening. Honestly, I was lamenting traveling to Indianapolis earlier, but I'm pretty excited. This is going to be a fun week. It's going to be a fun game to watch and cover on Saturday. And I am hopeful that you, our listener, are looking forward to it as much as we are to covering it. But until next time, until we return midweek, thank you for tuning in. Have a great day.